Welcome, fellow business brokers. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to have Tammy Teece with us from Live Oak Bank. How you doing, Tammy?
I'm doing very well, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being here. We also got Steve Mariani from Diamond Financial. How you doing, Steve?
I'm doing well, Jim, and thanks for organizing this and getting this information out. I think it's important to the brokers. So we
Absolutely.
appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely, Steve. I appreciate you joining us today. So today we're going to be talking about the Paycheck Protection Program, and it's also in short, it's called the PPP. First, we're going to be talking about the forgiveness of PPP monies, and then we're going to be talking about the new round of PPP monies that are coming out. If you go back to the CARES Act that was passed in March 27th of 2020, that was when the first round of PPP monies came out. And then on December 27th of 2020, there was a new act that was signed into law, and that act was called the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And I've just been calling it, a lot of people have just been calling it the CARES Act 2. So let's go ahead and begin. Let's start talking about the PP forgiveness. Steve, maybe you could start off and you could tell us what the criteria is for the forgiveness of the first round of PPP monies, if you don't mind.
Sure. And actually, what I've been monitoring these last few weeks and maybe even more than a month is how soon forgiveness would happen after you applied for it with the lenders. Because if you look at the rules surrounding acquisition loans, if there's a PPP in place, that's quite a few hoops that you have to jump through. I'm sure anyone who's watched any of your previous webinars is aware of that, putting the money in escrow and getting everybody signed off and all of those other things. So really what I was monitoring is, well, and what I've been preaching to the brokers really has been, get on top of your seller and make sure their PPP stuff is ready to go in so that as soon as that forgiveness portal opens, you can get your information in there. And what I have learned is they're getting turned around pretty quickly. So that's a big plus. And that was what I was hoping for. What I'm noticing is once the lender opens up their portal and receives that forgiveness application, the clients are typically getting forgiven within 1 and 2 weeks, but they're coming with a caveat that says we're waiting for SBA's forgiveness, and I'm monitoring both of those time frames, and that seems to turn around in less than a week also. So I'm looking at from start to finish anywhere from 1 to less than 4 weeks, which is a great thing for our acquisitions moving forward as far as a concern and holding up the closing. So I am seeing the forgiveness get done pretty rapidly. What else?
In the meantime, we're putting the money's in escrow, right? We can just go ahead and close as long as everybody.
Right. Once you get that forgiven, once it's forgiven officially and you got documentation that says it's forgiven, all those rules go away and it's go ahead and close like a regular loan, which is a wonderful, wonderful thing. Absolutely. But that's what my big concern was, because based on the SBA CARES Act, and Tammy can attest to this, I think they had up to 3 months to make the determination after it got to SBA. So that's where the big concern was. When the lender submitted the forgiveness application, how long was it going to take to get through SBA's process? But they're turning them around pretty quickly. And Tammy can feel free to shed light on this and what she's seeing. But that was my big concern as far as holding up the acquisitions moving forward. So I think that's off the table. As far as the forgiveness period, from 8 to 24 weeks was the easy fix. A lot of people missed the 8-week window by saying, hey, if I'm just doing payroll, it's 9 or 10 or 12 weeks. Well, that took that right off the table too. So they have, and I have seen these last couple months ease up on the restrictions on getting the forgiveness and them happening quickly. That's my take on it. I'd love to hear from Tammy and what she's seen on it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that, some of the smaller institutions, it's happening a little bit quicker. Just because of, logistics and things. Some of the bigger institutions, it's taking a little bit longer. But then again, they made a lot more loans as well. So plus, I think, being able to have, be able to walk into your credit union, and be able to, kind of have that conversation with somebody that maybe you dealt with through the whole process, as opposed to, maybe a department. So we're seeing a little bit quicker, with some of the smaller institutions, but overall, as a whole, it is going a lot quicker than we thought. Applications are pretty complete. And I definitely agree with the 8 weeks versus the 24 weeks. That made it a lot easier for people. The scramble, to get documents and to make sure that they were doing everything right. So I am pleased to see that it's going a lot quicker, because there was a lot of unknown at first. And I think that
That's
was
an understatement, Tammy.
yeah, it was making people very anxious to get to the forgiveness process before they even got their money, to know that what it would look like. But I think overall it's gone very well for what we kind of started with and had to work with, even though there were a lot of changes to the application and what the rules were. But I think that there was a lot of good communication that allowed everybody to kind of get to this point. And now, it's going a little bit smoother.
All right, great. And what about with the new addendum to the CARES Act, the CARES Act 2, if you want to call it that, there's new rules to that, right? The one-page attestment form.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that's a pretty cool thing in there. I mean, we had been talking about that last year that, 80% of the loans out there for the PPP were under $150,000. And, there's 5,000 SBA lenders or 5,000 lenders that did it, right? And there's usually only a little over 2,000 SBA lenders. So that was kind of a nightmare. So this is a really great situation, not only for us as business brokers, but business owners that want to sell and business owners in general, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that cap at that 150, it's a good number. It's probably a pretty decent average for what we would consider to be a small business owner for that time frame. When you start getting up and over that, yeah, absolutely. You want to do a little bit more research. You want to do a little bit more due diligence and make sure that, those dollars were allocated properly. But I think 150 is a great number. Like you said, Jim, that's probably 80% of what the PPP money applications were. So that's going to make it so much easier for the business owner, and obviously for us as, people that get involved in these transactions too. Just wipe it clean. It was done. They did what they needed to do, and let's move on.
So this form is basically you just sign the form, and it's just saying that if I got PPP monies, I'm just basically signing the form saying that I used it for what I was supposed to use it for, labor and I forget what else, employees and
Rent,
Rent.
rent.
direct expenses.
And said I use it for the things that I was supposed to use it for, and then the bank takes my word for it after I sign it, and then bam, you're done, right? So
Pretty much.
So
Go ahead.
Steve, Deborah Carmen and I did the petition last year for this thing. There was a congressman out of North Dakota that was sponsoring a bill to this. And, we had over 2,000 signatures. I'm sure ours was a drop in the bucket, but I want to lie to myself and say that we had some part of getting that passed.
I think it was all you, Jim. There's no doubt in my mind. I do want to talk about a couple other things in that PPP. What Tammy alluded to, right? I think it was 86% were 150 or below. It was in the mid 80s, no doubt. The other big thing in this bill that matters to the previous PPP people is really the tax implications.
Mm-hmm.
When they first came out, they said it will not be taxable, but you cannot expense those expenses paid for with the PPP money, which in effect was taking those expenses off of people's P&Ls and flowing the money right to the bottom line, which is what all the CPAs around the country started getting upset about. They said, you say it's not taxable, but by removing those expenses, it makes it taxable. Mm-hmm. So in this new bill, it does say you can leave the expenses in, and that PPP money is completely not taxable. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things, and Jim, I know you've heard me talk about this on webinars too, we saw CPAs putting it on P&Ls left and right. Mm-hmm. And like I said, after the first CPA or two, when I called them, they said, that's to make sure that small business owner understands their tax ramifications. And because all they look at is the bottom line and do the math in their head to say, okay, I owe 30% in taxes, and that's what they allocate for. So that's why CPAs were doing that. But now that is a great thing. That comes off and all the expenses stay on the P&L. Mm-hmm. So I think it makes it easier for the broker's side to calculate SDE. But even more importantly, it saves all those small business owners that amount of taxes, basically a third of what their PPP was. So that's the other big thing that I saw in this bill that matters to the majority of our business owners.
It's great that that's going to be a lot easier to do that. Let me ask you this question. It said that this one-page attestment form that came out, which I think is phenomenal. I mean, I think it's fantastic. It says that the SBA has 45 days from the passage of this act, which was passed December 27th, to come up with the procedures and how they're going to actually forgive the monies. So that puts out the February 10th. If you're not selling your business and you're just applying for forgiveness or signing the attestment form, should somebody wait until after February 10th, or do you think it doesn't matter? I guess it doesn't matter, right?
Personally, I don't think it really matters. I think it's a great question, but I think that, all in all, if we're looking at today's date, even if somebody is starting or going under contract today, it's probably going to be taken care of by the time you get to close or super close. Yeah.
That's how we're looking at it. We're looking at it as really a non-event and not paying much attention to it because it'll take care of itself.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, you guys have anything else about the forgiveness, or should we move on to the new round of PPP monies?
Yeah, that's another whole discussion.
All right, let's talk about the new monies. So, but before we begin, you think that, or do you know, or have they said the new round of PPP monies that are coming out, that is also going to be a one-page attestment form, or not?
I don't think that they've given that guidance yet. We're still waiting on a lot of, the details around process. So we do know qualifiers and different things of that sort, but the hope is by the end of the week that we'll have some information on the process, whether it's the form or how they go about applying, whether it's an increase to their current loan or they have to apply for a whole new loan. So we're just waiting on some of those details. So we're not clear on the process yet.
Okay. And when can somebody apply for it? Steve, when can somebody apply for the new PPP monies?
Not until those guidelines come out, which is what the lenders will be using to compile their application. We don't have an official application of what it's going to require. The talk on the street is by NIASA code, depending upon the hardest hit. And I do have some of that highlighted in the bill, but all it refers to as there are some NIASA codes that are hardest hit, but it doesn't specify them. So, the applications might be different per industry. We don't know what any of that looks like at this point. We do know that they are going to try and help the worst affected businesses, and that's a great thing. But part of me thinks it might not be worth it for a lot of sellers or even borrowers to apply for the second round. I don't know what the criteria is yet. That's really going to be the deciding factor.
But they gotta let us know pretty soon. It's got to start pretty soon, because doesn't you have to apply for the PPP monies by March 31st of this year, right? So we're 3 months out, so they got to let us know what the criteria is and the start date and everything, like real soon, right?
Well, there is the qualifiers already that they've given, and it's tied to revenue, a decline in revenue of 25% or more quarter over quarter from 19 to 20, first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter, whichever that decline happened. And it appears that they're going to allow P&Ls to be used from 2019 to 2020 to make that determination. But that's going to be the main thing that we didn't have last time. Is you have to qualify for that revenue decline first before you can apply for assistance. If you had a decline in revenue, then you can apply for additional assistance. Is that your understanding as well, Steve?
Absolutely. What a lot of what I'm hearing is, well, I could always find a quarter that was down over the previous year, depending upon my seasonality, and especially with COVID throwing stuff off. And a lot of the questions I'm getting, but we recovered the end of the year. We were just down that April, May, June quarter. Should I apply? Overall, my revenues wound up basically flat from 2020 to 2019. But under this criteria, I could apply because my second quarter was down. Should I? And that's where the gray area comes in. And the process matters, or what the forgiveness looks like, because maybe they say at the end of the year, if your gross revenue was still down, fine, keep it. Maybe if it's flat, you give it back. I don't know what that criteria looks like. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to tell people, yeah, go ahead and get that second round of PPP, not knowing the other end of it.
Well, I'll tell you, last year in 2020 that people got PPP monies. I mean, a lot of business owners thought, they'd be affected. And I saw business owners get the PPP monies and their business actually went up,
Yep.
so they still got that PPP monies and they didn't do anything wrong. They thought their business would be hit and it just wasn't hit. Remember, if we go back to April, we were all deer in the headlights. We didn't know what was going on. And, so at least that's a good start to 25%, during a quarter. But I think you're right, Steve. And just common sense says that should be play out all the way through the end of the year, because we shouldn't be giving government money to people that don't need it,
I agree. So
My suspicion is that's kind of why they put that qualifier in there. And again, nobody did anything wrong last time. It's just that we did it so fast and furious and we just wanted to get monies to people that needed it. And then, they didn't know what was going to happen with their business. So I suspect that's why they put, some kind of qualifier in there this time to make sure that the people that truly need it are the ones that are getting it.
Okay. So when does somebody have to had to own the business to be able to qualify for the second round of PPP monies?
I do believe you had to own it as of the beginning of the year.
Yeah, I think it's February 15th of 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that date stayed the same, didn't it?
Yeah.
I believe it did, yes.
Okay. So I'm very interested in this question. We had 5,000 lenders last time, that participated in the program, and going back to what we already said, usually there's only a little over 2,000 SBA lenders in the country. Do you think we're going to have so much participation by lenders the second round of PPP monies?
I can tell you that word on the street is there'll be about 30% less. Now, will that really happen? What the criteria comes out with changes that, who knows? But I can tell you what drove that number was the torture on the forgiveness side after the first round of PPP. Meaning, before that one-page attestation form, it was almost like lenders had to review your forgiveness application and make a determination. That was the critical, deadly piece. Like you just alluded to, almost 5,000 lenders wrote PPP. Right, 1,700 are really SBA experienced. So you had the other, 3,300 lenders without a clue. God forbid they had to review those financials or make any kind of determination. They weren't qualified to do that. And I've been preaching about this you've heard me, Jim, many times for months and months and months, where there were lenders that hired 400 temporary staff members just to produce PPP. Well, hell, you're not going to train them on lender review or document review. So that one-page attestation really was a big boost for the lenders. And that's really what drove all the stats that I saw that said, we're not doing this again if this comes up again, because this is a nightmare. So I think that one page is going to help bring a lot of those lenders back. I'd like to see them all come back because I want to see people get help. But
we don't know. We don't know if that one-page attestment form is going to be, for the second round of PPP monies yet, right?
Right. But it made the first round a lot easier, and at least it made it a little bit more appealing to all those lenders that said, we're not reviewing the 4,100 loans we did. We're not doing that.
I'm just going from a common sense approach here, though. And this is what I said last year, was this is common sense that the government doesn't want to show their hands. I think that one page, in my opinion, this isn't a fact. My opinion that the one-page attestment form will be used for the second round of PPP monies. The government just doesn't want anybody to know how easy it is to get it waived yet. That's my opinion. So don't,
Wouldn't be the first time, Jim. Yeah. And that is why a lot of times information dribbles out. It's a lot of times by intention. I mean, let's face it, September 27th, we were still waiting for the acquisition guidelines, which came out, 3 days later? Right. Thank goodness. After whining about them for months and them not coming out, the last 4 or 5 weeks before that September 27th deadline, we were then telling the lenders or the SBA, don't tell us anything. Just leave us alone. Now we don't want to hear from you until October. And that was a great thing, because had they come out with them guidelines a week before, hell, hundreds of millions wouldn't have closed.
Yeah. Ben's chiming in right now in the chat. And he's saying, don't assume anything. There's common sense with the government.
That's exactly right. And that's why Tammy and I have a job.
Right? I know, right? But I also have to wonder if it is going to be driven by process too, because if the process for new PPP and they qualify is just to ask for an increase to their current PPP, and they already have 140,000 and then they get another 60,000, do they then not fall within that guideline? So that's a bit of an unknown too. I mean, it might be a stretch, but again, we just don't know.
Right.
So if somebody applies for a new, second round of PPP monies, does that get added to what they've already lent on, or is that a whole new loan that's being opened up? But I guess, and that's the two part. I guess the second part of the question is, we know there's going to be, or Steve's projecting that we're going to have 30% less lenders participating in the program. So, you might not be able to go to the first bank that you went to the first time. So, do you guys know how that's going to work, or is that still unknown?
It's still unknown what the process is going to be. Whether it's going to be, if you have a current PPP, you have to go back to that bank and just ask for an increase, which might make sense. But if you're a new customer applying, you didn't apply before and now you're applying, you could go anywhere, because it would just be the new process. I think that for the current customers is where it might get a little bit convoluted until we know, because you could then make the argument that they fall within that 150 before they ask for their increase. So should it be two separate?
Okay. So the broker was asking, I guess he's having a lot of buyers asking him this, and he sent me an email the other day, and he's got a lot of buyers asking him this, and the buyers are asking basically, if I buy a business that has, and can they apply for the PPP monies? And an asset sale, I would say definitely not. What about a stock sale?
Well, based on the acquisition guidelines, they're saying stock and asset are the same.
Okay.
That's the acquisition guidelines that came out, October 1st or 2nd?
Yeah.
They're saying we don't care if it's a stock or an asset. They're looked at as an acquisition, change of ownership, and they're both the same. So that kicks in the escrow. And I'm guessing that's going to play the same with the second round of PPP, that the acquisition guidelines are going to remain consistent. But I guess we'll see that once it comes out.
So somebody can't buy a business and then apply for PPP monies on that business. They've had to have owned it probably since February 15th of 2020.
I think that's the bottom line.
As the
Correct.
principle.
Yeah. And I think the philosophy behind that is that you bought the business during the pandemic. You knew what you were kind of getting into, and it was doing well. So you were approved for loan, and all of that kind of all happened. So then now, why would you be applying for PPP? I mean, unless, we go into another dire situation where people have to close down, which I don't think we're going to get there, but that's just me.
That could be.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to say too, is I saw in my notes, it says that, and I just want to make sure everybody on the phone calls or on the webinar is aware of this, that you have to keep, people that have PPP monies have to keep records of their employment for 4 years and other records for 3 years.
Yes.
Now with the new PPP monies, it goes past employees and rent, right? It's including more things this time. What does it include?
I didn't see where it expanded. Did it expand what you could use it for?
It did. So, I'm just going to read it right off this text. It's now allowable expenses could include operation expenditures. If a company had to pay for any kind of software, cloud computing, or any human resources or accounting needs for people to be able to work remotely. And I think, obviously once you submit that, they'll determine, okay, was that, a need, a desk or a computer or what have you, but it sounds like they're going to include that. Any supplier costs for PPE that you bought to make your business compliant, hand sanitizers, masks, whatever, to be able to use. And then any supplier costs for the recipient's operations that might have been perishable. You may not find a lot of that. And then additionally, any covered property damage costs related to public disturbances that occurred in 2020 and are not covered by insurance. So those are the 4 additional things that they're including in expenses. Seems pretty vague right now. So what we don't know is, would you consider a computer you bought for your employee to be under that operation expenditure? I would say yes. What does the SBA say? But it makes sense because people had to shift gears and they had to try to do business the way that they had to, and they had to spend money to do that. You know, restaurants had to put up partitions and hand sanitizer stations at all airports and things we never thought we'd have.
Yeah. A
Yeah.
lot. Is there anything else about the PPP monies that we may have missed, either with the forgiveness or the second round? And please, anybody that's listening right now, if you want to raise your virtual hand, I can chime you in and you can ask questions to Steve and Tammy. We're not going to be able to answer too many questions live because we got a webinar right after this where we're going to be talking about SBA loans, but go ahead and raise your virtual hand if you have questions. I know some people were asking questions in the Q&A section, but if you really want your question asked, please raise your hand. But Steve, Tammy, do you guys have anything else that we may have missed about the PPP?
I'm not sure if this is going to be part of the PPP or, well, it is part of it for existing loans. So important to know if you're, kind of having these conversations is that they did approve some additional payments. We did have that 6-month subsidy on loans that were closed before September 27th, and anything that was existing prior to March 27th had 6 months of payments made for them. So what they are including now is for those folks who had those loans prior to March 1st, I believe it was, if they were closed, they are going to get an additional 3 months of payments made for them. There are certain industries, which Steve alluded to, which we don't know those hardest hit industries yet. Once we get those codes, those industries will get an additional 5 months of payments. Those payments will be capped at $9,000, but that could be significant for those industries and for those people that already had loans existing. So they'll get an additional three months of payments. And so that will go to their lender to get those payments for them. It's not part of the PPP process, but I think it's important for those people to know.
Great. Lisa was chiming in on the chat and she was saying that, I had mentioned the 4 years for labor records. You got to keep that for the PPP and then 3 years, records for everything else. She's saying that she just got a letter from one of her clients that was 6 years. You have to keep the records. So I'm thinking maybe the SBA is saying 3 and 4, and maybe the banks are building on top of that criteria. That's what I'm assuming with that. So obviously always follow what the bank the lender's going to require.
I'm thinking that's probably more IRS than anything.
Oh,
because we're mandated to 7 years
good
of all
point,
documentation. So I am guessing it's going to be more of an income expense thing with the IRS.
Good point, Steve. All right, let's bring John in. John has a question. John, let me bring this to a. How you doing, John? Where are you calling from? You got your mute on, by the way.
Hold down your space bar.
There we go. Greenville, North Carolina.
All right. Welcome, John, from North Carolina.
Thank you very much. I enjoy your podcast.
Thank you, buddy.
Question is, one of my clients complained about the circumstance, and I don't know if it was driven by their lender, but they had an idle loan and a 3P loan. And they were told that they were going to have to repay their idle loan of $10,000. Has that been addressed in this second wave?
I believe it is, and I think that 10,000 is what now automatically being considered a grant and forgiven. But Tammy, if you know more about that, please.
Yeah, it's my understanding as it reads that before they were deducting if you got that $10,000 from your forgiveness, and now they are not.
Right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Hey, we found a question we could answer.
Yay!
Well done.
I forgot to ask you guys this, and if anybody else has any other questions, raise your hand, and then we'll get to the next webinar, the SBA. But while we're waiting to see if anybody else has a question, has there been any changes to the idle situation? or no? I haven't heard anything or seen anything. I was just curious.
I haven't read anything. I did see it was mentioned someplace, but I hadn't gotten deep into the writings there. I don't
Okay.
think anything major changed except for that 10,000 that I know of.
All right.
Yeah. I didn't see any major changes. I think they'll replenish it. So there's more because it did run out at one point. So they'd probably just reallocated some more money to it, but I don't think that will change too much. That was pretty specific.
All right. Andy Cognetta's got a question. He's got a really good question. He's asking, is there any financial barrier beyond the 25% lower quarter to qualify for another loan, even if they are now profitable?
It does not say that, no. Currently, it's just tied to that 25% revenue decline.
For a quarter, for
It
one of the
says
quarters.
a quarter.
A
It does
quarter.
not say year end. So that's why we're thinking the P&Ls will drive that. So they'll get quarter over quarter for each one. And hopefully they'll be more specific about what they want in order to make that determination, because you could make an argument, you could have been down 50% in third quarter and that really hurt you, right? And so then that kind of flowed over into fourth quarter, but then at the end of fourth quarter, you were profitable. So I think there's an argument to be made there. So I think we're really just going to need to get drilled down to it.
Okay. All right. Excellent.
Yeah, and there are other programs. If it is an existing business and not an acquisition, which we'll talk about in the SBA side, there are additional incentives on that side also to help existing.
Great. We got another question from Mike. Mike, where are you calling from?
This is Mike from Sunbelt in Bethesda, Maryland.
Maryland. Oh, welcome, Mike.
Thank you so much. I'm just wondering, we closed the deal and the seller had $300,000 PPP loan. And based on recommendation from her CPA, she decided to pay money back to the lender because she was told she has to pay taxes on it. And her entity is actually still in existence. And is she able to go back to the lender and change the status and complete application for forgiveness, or it's done?
So what are you saying?
I'm gonna guess. Is she the seller? Did you say? Did she sell her business?
Yes.
Or she still, okay.
Seller.
Mike, my opinion of that is that's a question for her lender, because if she already paid it back, you know, that's going to be for them to say whether because it's kind of the transaction's closed, in my opinion. So it sounded like you know, somebody told her not to wait to find out what was going to happen with the tax ramifications of this. And now they've come out and said that there's not going to be. And so unfortunately she got maybe caught in the crossfire, but I would definitely suggest she talk to her lender about that.
All right, great.
Yeah, if she paid the full balance back, I would have to agree with Tammy. There's a slim chance of her getting it back again now.
All right, we got a question from Gregory here. So if you received an EIDL loan in 2020, can you apply a second time in 2021? Do you guys know? I just want to say they're not experts on the EIDL situation. So
And we aren't. I believe that you can, from what I know, but don't write that down.
all right. Well, hey, I think that should wrap it up with a PPP, because we're going to do a webinar right after this. And we're going to be talking about SBA loans, like right after this. So stay tuned. But Steve, Tammy, I really appreciate you guys talking to us today about PPP. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Our pleasure.
Giving us your wisdom, I should say. So anyways, for all you business brokers out there, my fellow business brokers, keep working hard, keep working smart, keep making those buyer-seller connections. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It would be greatly appreciated. Until next week, take care. Bye-bye.